Williams from Salary Transparent Street. We're in Indianapolis, Indiana. Let's go ask some people what they do and how much they make.
I sell hot dogs.
How much do you make doing that?
It might be, depending on the location, anywhere between a $50,000 to a $100,000 a year.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Do you feel fairly compensated?
Sometimes I do until them bills come.
Right. What are some of the pros and cons of your job? Like, what do you like about it?
I like everything about it. There's nothing I really don't like except when I got to go back to the grocery store. Now, when I got to go to the grocery store, man, it's a hassle because it's hard work.
How did you get into this job? How long have you been doing it?
This summer will be 5 years. I was incarcerated when this idea came in my head. So when I got out, I said, no more trouble. I'm coming out here and I'm doing my thing.
What pieces of advice would you share with anyone interested in also starting a stand, or any pieces of advice?
Go hard. You're not going to see no money unless you go hard every day. Go hard.
I make about $42,000 a year.
This is my 30th year and I have a master's degree, so I make about $80,000.
I make about 42 as well.
Do you feel fairly compensated for what you do?
No, I do not. Being a teacher, I feel like we put a lot more time into our job than our hour, and so there's a lot of overtime that we're not compensated for.
At this point in my life, I feel like my pay is adequate, but I don't have any kids at home anymore or anything like that.
No, I don't think it is either. We spend a lot of time after school hours on the weekends prepping and planning, and those hours aren't counted for.
What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
I get to work with kids, and I don't know, they fill me with joy each day.
What about some of the cons?
I think just the time that requires me to do my job well.
Definitely the pros is working with the children, and then cons is not always being respected by others in other professions.
The pros are making a difference in our community, and the cons would be, again, with the respect, not getting enough respect.
What do you think is the future for pay and teachers? Do you think that it should be raised higher, unionization? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we're here right now for a union rally.
Amazing.
And so I think having our state just listen to our voice and keeping our voice in education.
Indiana is one of the lowest paid averages for teachers, and they're having a really hard time recruiting new teachers, and a lot of positions are being filled by people who do not have a teaching degree, and so the quality of education for students is declining. So to attract people who want to stay in education long term, yes, they do need to up the salary.
I feel like I'm very hopeful that our voices will be heard. There will be some changes coming.
So I'm a data analyst and he is a data modeler.
How much do you make doing what you do?
I make 81.
I make $70,112 a year.
Do you guys feel fairly compensated for your work?
That's a hard one, right? In the private sector, I would make more. But compared to plenty of people, yeah, it's good.
I think I am fairly compensated for what I do and where I am in my career.
What are some of the pros and cons of your work?
I get to work with great people, and honestly, it's pretty laid back. You know, it's a 9 to 5.
I like that I work for a department where I feel like I'm doing something good for the state and for the people in it.
What are some pieces of career advice that you would share with anyone interested in doing what you do? What has helped you get into the field, or what kind of advice would you share in general?
Learn SQL and never turn your nose at new technology because you think it won't be important, because it might be.
I would say SQL for sure. I learned from SQLzoo.com or .net.
Did you need a degree, or in tech a lot of people are taking certifications to break into it? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm kind of strange. I have a PhD actually,
Oh,
so
wow.
that, yeah. I don't think certifications are helpful, but mainly, I mean, you gotta have something like a project or certification to get your foot in the door, and then when you're talking to people, if you can talk shop, people can tell that you know what you're doing.
I think that a degree is helpful, but any form of fundamental knowledge in computer science concepts is sufficient for getting into the field.
And you guys said you work for federal, so was your pay listed in the salary when you applied?
Yes, so it was. And actually, anybody who works for state government, you can just Google Indiana employee compensation, and you can look up people's salaries there. I've done that a lot. I think pay transparency is excellent.
It's absolutely vital that everyone knows they're being fairly compensated, not only against their peers, but just as a general concept.
I'm a club director for
How much do you make doing what you do?
like 55 on average.
Do you feel fairly paid?
No, I feel like people that work with after school care don't make enough because it's just so much responsibility when it comes to the youth and developing their character. So I feel like they should be paid way more, even teachers too.
I agree. Oh my gosh. What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
Definitely being with the youth all day, seeing their growth. Some of the perks, you know, you get merch, sponsorships and stuff like that. Cons would definitely have to be one, the pay, and then just a lot of long hours, and you take a lot of the stress home too. too.
What kind of career advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do or just in general?
If you want to be in childcare, you're not going to make as much as you would like starting off, but also education is the way to go too if you want to get more.
I am a retirement plan specialist.
How long have you been doing it?
I've been doing it for about 6 months now.
How much do you make?
I make $90,000 a year plus commission.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
Yeah,
How's cost of living out here in Indiana?
it's decent. You know, it's affordable. You can always find somewhere affordable to live.
What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
It's a grind. I guess some people can say that's a con if you're not used to that, but I like it. I guess it just depends on the kind of person you are. Pros is that I love what I do.
What career advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do or just career advice in general?
Never stop going. Don't give up. Don't be scared to change, to adjust your career. If you're not liking something, there's always something out there better.
I teach 5th grade elementary school. My current salary right now is about $62,000. I've been teaching for 15 years. I started at $29,000. They start new teachers in my school district at $50,000 now. So I've been there a long time, and my salary, I would say, is not grown like it could be.
I'm a trade support manager, but specifically I work on the derivatives escalation team. My salary is like 88 now. I started off at 33 and have been there for 12 years.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
It's stressful, but yeah.
What are some of the pros and cons of your jobs?
I get to work with children, so that's great. I do know that what I make in comparison to what a lot of my students' parents make is adequate for as much time as I get off. I mean, I feel like I'm a professional. I have 3 degrees, and maybe I should make more money when I've spent that much on education. However, when I look at where a lot of families are, I know that I have a lot more than some people have. And I get to be home with my children on holidays and things like that, and I don't miss out.
Well, I had to work really hard. I don't have a degree. So to be in management for a publicly traded white-collar company, I had to work really hard. But you're talking to people with their money. I mean, you know, so it can be a stressful thing. So that's kind of the rewarding part, but also the tough part. When people go to the restaurant and they're hungry and they're a little hangry, when people have stress about their money, they get a little hangry too. Little grumpy pants.
Without a degree, what has helped you break into your role? Like any pieces of advice for maybe new grads?
You can read all this stuff about emotional intelligence, but get off your cell phone and talk to people, be able to make eye contact and listen and be present in the moment, as opposed to thinking about what I want to go do next. Because then you're actually fully invested, and then you can actually help that person. It's a genuine caring.
I'm a teacher.
What do you teach?
I teach 3rd grade at an elementary school.
How much do you make doing what you do?
This year I make $59,000.
How long have you been doing it?
7 years in the public school.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
No, I don't.
Do you mind telling us why? Like how much would you hope to be paid for what you do?
I think education is a big part of what I do, and I've went out and got my master's degree. So for the salary that I have right now as a teacher's taught for 7 years, it just seems like I need a lot of education for that salary.
Did you get any student loan debt?
I did. I am fortunate only to have $10,000 of that left.
Great. Okay.
It was a $30,000 commitment though, and that $10,000 I can get forgiven, but only after paying on my loan for 10 years.
What do you think needs to change?
I think that if teachers were paid and compensated for all the work they do, we have a lot of unspoken work that we do outside of our contract hours just to keep our classrooms running, and if we could get compensated for that, I think that would be amazing.
What pieces of advice do you have for teachers to help them advocate for themselves, or any career advice in general that you'd like to share?
I think that one piece of advice I would say is to get involved in your local community and your local union, if that's available to you, because your union will advocate for you at the State House. I can stay informed on the bills that are going through that affect my job. I can come up here and I can advocate and use your voice and tell others about what you do and what's going on, even in the legislature.
I own an employment agency, and I've got a few different side hustles on the side.
How much do you make?
From the employment agency, I make $57,600, and then from the other side hustles combined, it's about another $17,000, $18,000. So about $75,000 all in.
And you have a team too, so
I do, and I love taking care of my team. I prefer to invest in them more and have a comfortable living. I live a great existence. I love volunteering. I love, having the freedom to do what I'm able to do and focus on my priorities. I love what I do. I'm living the dream.
Cool. How'd you get into HR and recruiting?
So I have a bachelor's degree in management with a concentration in human resources, and from there networked. I had a number of jobs over. I've been in HR for 10 years, but I started my company 4 years ago, 5 years ago roughly, and started where I was doing recruiting for electrical engineers, and there's two kinds. There's power and there's controls. And we needed power engineers, and our clients that we were working with needed controls engineers, and so it turned into a recruiting relationship there. And then with COVID, we evolved into recruiting and staffing. The difference is recruiting is direct placement. They're never on our payroll. Staffing is they're on my payroll for 90 days, up to 90 days. That's how we got into it, and we roll and we roll and we roll. And revenues, we've done, last year we did 5 million. This year we're probably going to do about 4.5 in total, but we love what we do. We believe in trust and care for our employees, and there's no job that I'm hiring for that I wouldn't do myself. So living by that, doing that, and our people speak for themselves. They return to us, they trust us, we care about them. It's the best kind of relationship.
What are some of the pros and cons of your roles?
Pros are that every role we specialize in has the potential to convert. The con is that sometimes the companies, if we're in the early stages of a relationship, we're still kind of feeling them out, figuring them out, and we're trying to establish that trust. We need clients and candidates, so it's hit or miss sometimes, and that's the part that I don't like. I want to have more confidence in the relationships. I'm trying to help people get jobs. If it turns out great, it's a gamble, but I mean, every client was new at one, so that's the hard part of it, but people can be flaky too, people can be great too, so it's both ways, and you're just trying to feel that out and do that due diligence process. Is where we come in. Indeed has been a phenomenal partner for us.
What pieces of career advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do?
Red flags are red flags. They're not pink flags. They're not anything else. If it's a red flag and you have a bad feeling about it, or you feel like you're being sold something, you have options. On the flip side of that too is if you are facing or in a undesirable situation, evaluate your options always. And there are plenty of people out here hiring. There are plenty of people that are good companies to work for that are hiring. Always look on your resources. Have people in your corner. Always advisors, counselors, things like that, and talk to them. All them. Always.
That's great advice. How do you feel about pay transparency?
I love it because you take out the games, and as a recruiter, if I can tell somebody what are you wanting and not what do you need, what do you want to be at, and then I can say, okay, my client probably will do this. It takes the used car salesman out of it, and I've got a relationship with that candidate because I need both sides. So if they don't trust me, that I'm thinking about them too, I am always. I don't want to burn somebody for a placement. It's not worth it to me. Being self-employed, I don't have anybody to report up to, so I'm accountable for every person I come across because they're my neighbors at the end of the day. So pay transparency is everything. I don't like games, I don't like gimmicks, and I don't like gotchas. And it's a livelihood, not a used car or jeans. So it's a livelihood, so it means a lot.
We're in the professional development space, specifically focused on leadership development in the organizations. We facilitate conversations around mental health awareness and DE&I. But we believe everything rises and falls on leadership.
Our second business, we do therapy practice, and we work with teens and adults and doing one-on-one couples and family work.
How much do you make collectively, both your businesses?
Collectively, we're around $200K.
You guys feel happy with that? Do you feel fairly compensated?
Yeah, for the most part. It's great being entrepreneurs. We negotiate our contracts, and we definitely are working towards what we feel is fair value.
What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
Pros and cons. Well, we're our own boss, right? If there's a con, the question is, do we really want to work for ourselves or not? Like, am I the sort of boss that I want to work for?
I hope you guys like each other as colleagues.
Yes, most definitely.
It can definitely be a challenge at times, but communication is key, and so that's something that we work on both professionally and personally. And as leadership development and professional development professionals, it's just a part of the journey, growing in those areas.
I'd say all pros. I don't know, there's a whole lot of cons. We love the flexibility. We have family, so we have a couple sons, and it gives us the ability to do it all.
What kind of pieces of career advice would you share with maybe new grads, or what have you learned in general that you'd like to share?
Commit to lifelong learning. Education doesn't have to begin and end in the academic space. There's so many things that you can use to invest in yourself, whether it's going through programming like what we provide or just going on YouTube and just learning about a particular subject. Self-education is vital.
I would probably second that too, and just say keep asking questions. Always ask questions.
What would you share for ways that businesses can improve and better care for their employees?
Well, ways that businesses can improve, especially for those of us that are starting out, start as close to your vision or ideal as possible. That's going to really inform and create your culture, and culture is just one of the most difficult things to change. As we go into organizations, we are providing interventions for change because organizations aren't where they think they should be or where they wanted to be in the long term, but it ultimately takes time, and it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes resources. So start as close to the ideal as possible so that you won't have to
go far away from it.
Exactly, in the long term.
I mean, and if your company culture doesn't include being very mental health aware and practicing things like leadership development, being self-aware as leaders, then it sounds like you got some work to do.
How can companies reach you if they need your help?
Yeah, you can read us across social media platforms at Lead Well Strategic on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. You can also reach out to us at contact@leadwellstrategic.com.
I'm a HR director.
How much do you make doing what you do?
$125,000 a year plus a 20% bonus.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
Yes, especially for my geographic location.
How did you get here? Like, what kind of educational background do you have? Like, what degree did you get?
I actually have no degree. I fell into HR about 9.5 years ago as a coincidence in my early 30s and kind of went, oh my God, I found something I'm good at that I want to do. And that was when I realized where I want to be when I grew up. And so I've worked really hard to kind of get where I'm at, and I've done a few industries and take a lot of pride in what I do.
What are some strategies that helped you get your foot in the door, like networking, anything like that?
So I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you're willing to communicate with people and have a certain understanding where they're coming from. HR is often at the forefront of the changing pieces of the workplace, and so you have to be adaptive, but you have to understand how resistant to change other people are. And so I think the best way is to network, but then also be an open ear. I always say I'm not the department of no, I'm the department of let's talk about it. Examples, I had a manager once who wanted to let someone go because he thought they were too old, and I was like, instead of saying no because it's obviously illegal, I said, well, let's talk about what's going on. It was a performance issue, so we addressed the performance issue and took care of that, and that resolved the issue. Nobody wants to hear no, but they're willing to talk about it.
What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
The biggest pro is I think I am in a unique position to make a really impactful piece at a variety of people of all different walks of life. The negative is I do not get the pay for a psychologist, but I am frequently someone's psychologist. In the end, I welcome that, and sometimes you just need someone to listen to you, and if that's what it takes, I'm there for them.
How do you feel about pay transparency?
I'm a big fan of it. I think there are some systemic challenges that are tough. Usually historic in an organization where it's not so much justifying, honestly, even the underpaid folks, it's the people are paid appropriately and justifying to them why that guy is making too much money, because it's generally bad practice to reduce someone's pay. And so I think that's a challenge. I think the first easy step, something I support, is putting pay in job postings. It's so easy, and honestly, I look at employment as a transaction. We provide benefits and money in exchange for labor and skill. If we don't get our value, we're going to say something. If you don't get your value, you should say something.
What pieces of advice would you share with new grads going into the workforce now, or what have you learned in general that you would share?
I think talking about HR, especially as you get into HR leadership, is that there's a careful balance. I have a philosophy about HR leadership in that a poor HR leader focuses on the needs and wants of an employee. A good HR leader focuses on the needs and wants of an organization, but a great HR leader tries to find a way to marry those together. Ultimately, I'm paid to protect the organization. I'm an employee of the company just like they are, but that doesn't mean I have to act in a way that's mutually exclusive to taking care of the employee. Frequently, it provides good business sense.
And the organization is made up of employees, so you got to protect them too.
They are our most valuable resource.
I'm an intern for 2 senators at the Indiana State House.
How much do you make doing that?
$400 a week before taxes.
Do you feel that's fairly compensation?
Absolutely not. When it comes down to it, we get paid less than $10 an hour. It's a great experience, but definitely not compensated well.
How did you get the internship? Like, what steps did you take that helped you, that could help other students who are also interested in doing what you do?
There's a couple different applications and you have to write an essay, but I'm interested in education, so I work with a couple senators that focus on education.
How do you feel about that with teachers and compensation?
I think that teachers need to be paid more and respected more and treated as the professionals that they are.
I'm a legislative intern at the Indiana State Senate.
How much do you make doing what you do?
I make the same price, like $400 before tax.
What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
Well, I want to go into politics in the future, and eventually I do want to go to law school. So right now I think I'm studying for my LSAT after this session ends, so it pays off.
What pieces of advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do? Like, what helped you get the job?
Do not be afraid of networking, because I used to be very shy, but then I just met so many incredible people, and the biggest advice I've been told is the only difference between you and them is a title.
I'm an intern with the Indiana State Senate.
How much do you make doing what you do?
Like $10 an hour.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
Not even close. We just do a whole lot of work for no money. Everybody in here's got a lot of money.
What are some of the pros and cons of your role?
Con, we got to stay late without getting paid. A pro, we get free food.
What career advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do? Like, what helped you get the role?
Just write a good cover letter. That's it. Have a good interview. Just practice.
So I'm a Senate intern with the Indiana General Assembly.
How much do you make doing what you do?
$400 a week.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
It can be difficult to live on that in Indy as a student.
What do you feel like you should be compensated for your work?
I mean, even $5 more an hour, because it's roughly $10 an hour, would really be helpful.
What are some of the pros and cons of your job?
So it's a brilliant experience. I get to work with senators every day and make connections. The cons, the long hours.
What pieces of advice would you share with others interested in doing what you do? Like, what helped you get the role? Any words of advice?
Just really be proactive with finding those experiences. Don't be worried about failure.
So I work with development with a nonprofit.
How much do you make doing what you do?
I make $61,000 a year.
Do you feel fairly compensated?
Yes. Yep.
What are some of the pros and cons of your role?
So I get a lot of work with different individuals. I have opportunity to be extroverted and communicating with people and the funding side, but also more introverted where I get to write grants and just take time to kind of focus on my work and just develop my own rhythms.
What pieces of advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do? Like what helped you get the role?
So I asked a lot of questions and found key people to give me advice.
Well, I'm a recruiter.
How much do you make doing what you do?
Last year I made $46,000.
How did you get into your role?
Well, I messaged on LinkedIn just out of the blue because he always was posting about openings, and I wasn't really expecting an internal role, but he was like, we have an internal opening, would you be interested? So I was like, sure. The good thing about him is he takes chances on people that don't really have experience. So I didn't really have that amount of experience a lot of places are looking for. So I feel like the current role I have now gives a lot of good professional development. He paid for my SHRM certification, so I didn't have to pay anything about that. Just learning a lot. I think I get paid fairly, but also what I've been learning and the development I've been getting is very beneficial.
What are some of the pros and cons of your role?
The turnover, depending upon if it's the environment or the pay, or maybe too low, there's a lot of turnover, and sometimes we're responsible for the firing. So then you have to have that difficult conversation, just letting them know, here's the reason why. That's probably the most difficult part of the role.
What pieces of advice would you share with anyone interested in doing what you do?
Just don't be afraid of rejection, and then maybe just don't be afraid to reach out yourself. So just don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Do you have any advice for anyone who needs to network but is an introvert?
Just realize they're kind of in the same boat as you. You might be talking to another introvert. All you can do is say hi. Most of the time, people are willing to talk to you, and they're going to be able to listen to what you have to say. They're not going to be malicious or anything. You have that anxiety about what they're going to say to me when I talk to them, but more often than not, it's positive. They're here to meet people as well.